All right. Looks like we're up and running. Okay. All right. Hope everybody's having a good day. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to chime in here on the live. Feel free to shoot me a DM, send me a message on any of our social media accounts. Anybody who's interested today, you do get the free guide. That's the preseason guide that gives you everything that we talk about today as a checklist. And the whole goal that you never have to review anything, you never have to need it. But the goal of the checklist is to make sure that you have it in case an injury does occur, and you're trying to figure out what the next step should be, what the first step should be. So once we finish our webinar today, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a DM. Again, if you want that guide, DM me your email and I'll send it out to you as soon as we're done here. Hello and welcome to another Midwest Concussion Clinic monthly Lunch and Learn. The Lunch and Learn titled Before the Whistle. It's a parent's guide to preparing for concussion season. When the fall sports start to kick up, we're now at the kind of the later stages of summertime. Practices start to get a little bit more intense. Everybody starts to gear up for the season. What can we do to ensure that the athlete's brain is healthy, and we're doing everything that we can to try to prevent an injury from occurring in the future? The whole goal for this webinar is to give you actionable things that you can look for, give you a chance to identify what we're talking about when we talk about different concussion symptoms, and kind of where we're, what we're looking for as parents, as athletes, as coaches, as athletic trainers, what you're looking for to kind of ensure that we can have the happiest and healthiest and most successful season that we can moving forward. So without further ado, here is our Lunch and Learn. Again, the goal or the roadmap for today's webinar is the first thing we have to do is we have to do a basic understanding of what concussions are. We have to have the ability to recognize concussion symptoms. We're going to talk about common and uncommon symptoms. We're going to talk about what we can do to help reduce the risk of concussions, what baseline testing is and how we use it, and then what you can take away and what actionable steps that you can have to ensure that you have the healthiest and safest season that your kid or that you would like, or any of the athletes that you're in charge of would like to have. So again, thank you for joining in. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, either here on YouTube or over on TikTok. If you have any questions that pop up after the webinar, feel free to DM me at MW Concussion on all of our social media accounts. I really appreciate you stopping by. And if you missed the live version, you can catch the replay on our YouTube here later this afternoon. So why do I put together webinars? The whole challenge with concussions is, I will tell you, anybody I work with, nobody cares about concussions until something happens. And then when we sit down and try to find the information, we have a limited capacity. We're nervous, we're stressed, we're irritated. Where is that information going to come from when we actually need it? So that's why I spend so much time talking about the education side of things post-concussion. Not only do I educate people that I'm working with, my goal with these type of webinars is to bring awareness to concussions, to give you a platform to have that education and information, then in case on the off chance that you do need it. I hope nobody ever needs it. My whole goal with concussions is to never actually have to work with anybody. But the reason my clinic exists is to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to properly manage concussions. So why do I do this monthly webinar? What's the Midwest Concussion Clinic monthly Lunch and Learn? It's my chance to spread awareness on concussions, provide accurate and updated information, and ensure that the people that are out there that need the information can find it when it comes up. So the goal for today is to empower parents and athletes with accurate information. The internet is a wild place. There is nothing keeping you from doing certain things when it comes to the internet. There is no gatekeeper to social media that tells you this information is accurate or not accurate. There is nothing that we can, that necessarily needs to be done to share information. I have built a clinic based on sharing accurate and easy to understand information. It's just like the podcast that I have, a Midwest Minute with Matt, simple concussion conversations that just make sense. The goal is to take complex neurological conditions and break them down into easy to understand and easy to accept or digest pieces, because when we have concussions or we're looking for accurate information, nobody really has the time to sit down and listen to an hour-long speech about it. So the goal is today to portray accurate information that you can digest easily without too much of a medical background. I want to reassure you that sports are safe. you're going to hear that theme throughout this topic, throughout this conversation. Yes, concussions are there. There's a risk for concussions and everything. But at the end of the day, sports are safe. And there's not necessarily a way of completely preventing injuries or completely preventing concussions. But we need to do everything that we can to ensure that we're putting ourselves in the best situation. So I don't want you to be afraid of sports when we talk about preparing for concussion season. It has nothing to do with the dangers of sports. It has everything to do with making sure that you understand injuries are a part of sports. Injuries are a part of life. I could put you in a bubble and float you down the, out in your life and say, hey, good luck. You'll never get injured that way. And a passing car could run into your bubble and then all of a sudden you're injured again. So it has nothing to do with the risk of sports. Yes, there are risks associated with sports, some more than others, but at the end of the day, sport participation is safe. You have you have just the same amount of risk to fall down the stairs that you do to get hit in the head with a golf ball, right? And hypothetically speaking, I'm sure scientifically there's difference in probability with both of those things. But that's kind of what I'm getting at is we can get hurt doing day-to-day stuff, right? My clinic is built around treating adults, work-related accidents, car accidents, sports-related injuries, weekend warrior stuff. The risk is there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that sports are dangerous. I want you to understand sports are safe. We just need to take the proper precautions to ensure that we're doing everything we can to reduce the risk of injury during sport participation. I want to be able to provide practical steps. Let's say an injury does happen. What can we do to ensure that we're setting yourself up or your child up for safety? What can we do to set you up for success during concussion recovery to ensure that you don't have to work with somebody like me? That recovery goes easily and you can get through it without any lingering issues and you never have to see me. I have a terrible business model. My whole goal in life is to never actually treat anybody. My whole goal is I want to do as much as I can to provide the information to help you navigate through this without ever needing to sit down face to face with me. Now, realistically, that's not going to be the case for everybody, and that's why I have a clinic that exists. But I want to be able to provide practical, actionable first steps that can help set you up while you're waiting to get into a healthcare provider, whether it's me or somebody else. While you're waiting to get in, what you can do to set yourself or your child up for success during concussion recovery. And then the last thing I want to do is touch on baseline testing because in our area, we have two major camps with baseline testing. We either are adamant that we do it every year or we don't do it at all. I'm going to give you the pros and cons, talk to you about baseline testing, why it's important for baseline testing, especially for somebody in my shoes trying to make decisions on treatments and make decisions on pushing you in the right path. But I want to make sure that we're talking about baseline testing as a whole. So the first step to being able to prepare yourself for the upcoming sports season is making sure that you know what a concussion truly is. Concussions are not a bruise. For a long time, that's what we've told patients because it was easier for people to understand that when you got hit in the head that you bruised your brain, that your brain would slosh around and hit different ridges inside the skull, and depending on where the bruises are or what symptoms that you dealt with. Now that technology is good enough, imaging is getting good enough that we can see things, we realize that the brain does not necessarily move inside the skull like we used to tell people. There are certain times where bruising does occur, right? There are certain times that you'll be able to see the imaging, you'll be able to see structural change, but that is a very low probability, less than, I tell people that CT scans come back negative 90 to 95% of the time, okay? CT scans, x-rays, MRIs are not going to show a concussion. In the healthcare world, that's what makes things a little bit more challenging because advanced imaging isn't going to tell us anything. It doesn't show us that a concussion's occurred. Advanced imaging can rule out a more serious injury, but it doesn't rule in a concussion in the big picture. Concussions are not structural changes to the brain. They are a disruption of the electrical signal inside the brain. Just like you have a heartbeat, you have a brain beat that's totally unique to you. When you get hit during sports, when you fall, when you get into a car accident, when you bump your head on the countertop, the neurons that carry the electrical signal around our brain will shear. They'll move back and forth. That shearing force will cause those neurons to break their neural connections. They'll fire all at the same time. That triggers the brain to go, uh-oh, something's not right, and it will slow itself down while it tries to heal. Concussions are not a structural injury in the big macro picture. At the microscopic level, I can argue that yes, there is structural change that occurs. But if I were to take a brain, I talk to my patients, if I were to cut your head open and take your brain out and look at it, it looks the exact same as it did before you got hurt. Electrically, though, we have to figure out what happened. Concussions are a form of traumatic brain injury. It's not a bruise. Even the worst bruises that you have go away within 7 to 10 days if you're doing things right and there's no active bleeding that happens. So we've ruled out that there's no real active bleeding that occurs. And if it were traditionally a bruise, it would get better quickly. Bruises are something that most people will sit here and say, it's a bruise, it's no big deal. Concussions are a big deal. Concussions are a traumatic brain injury. They're a form of traumatic brain injury that they're labeled as mild traumatic brain injury. But on my end of things, I drop that mild, tag, because if I'm talking to somebody that I'm working with that's been symptomatic for 6 months and they've lost their job or they've had to quit or they've had to move in with their parents or they've lost a relationship, tell that person it's mild. Concussions are a traumatic brain injury that we get by hitting our head, rapidly moving our head, or rapidly moving the body. There doesn't necessarily have to be a direct impact to the head either. And that's where a lot of athletes will struggle. I don't remember hitting my head. Well, there can be a cumulative effect of hitting your head. There can be the body movements. There can be the jarring that happens when we fall or when we hit the ground. Our shoulder pads jar. Well, I didn't hit my head. Why am I dealing with this? Well, it's the rapid movement of the head, neck, or body that can cause the same shearing force to occur inside the brain. Concussions are an energy crisis in the body. If you've ever had a concussion, that's why you feel so run down afterwards. There's not enough energy being produced, and the brain's using more of that energy that is produced to function on a regular basis. I use the analogy on the slides of think about your iPhone at an 8% battery. Okay, so think about the phone that you're working with. It's an 8% low battery. We're in low power mode, and every app that you have is open and slowly running in the background. Well, that slows the phone down. The battery dies faster, the phone gets sluggish, the apps don't work as well. It's a pretty accurate representation of a concussion. The brain is working at a lower energy availability, it's using more energy than normal, and it's like all of our apps are open and we don't know where the music is coming from. Everything is slowly overstimulating you, it's slowing you down, it's draining the battery, and then at the end of the day, I got to recharge my phone. Just like the brain, we got to sleep to recharge the battery. But now instead of getting to 8%, you only got to 6%. You get to 4%. And that's where we start to feel run down. Again, if anybody has any questions at any point, feel free to drop them in the chat. For whatever reason, how I'm set up right now, I'm going to adjust this. I can't really see the chat if anybody's got any questions here. But the goal of me doing these webinars, going live, coming online and giving you this information is I want to be readily accessible. So if you guys have any questions at any point, feel free to drop them in the chat, send me a DM, shoot me a message, be like, hey Matt, what's this mean? What were you talking about with this? What do I need to do for X, Y, and Z? My whole goal is to help people. I'm put on this planet to help. Right now, how I help is my clinic, but I'll make sure to help anybody who has any questions or anybody that needs it. So we've got a little bit of an understanding on what concussions are. We understand that it's not a structural damage, it's electrical change. So when we start looking at preparing for that sports season, we know going into it that we may not find anything on a traditional CT scan, X-ray, or MRI, but that doesn't mean that the brain injury hasn't occurred. Concussions are just that. They're a brain injury. They are a traumatic brain injury. So when we're looking at identifying concussions, how prevalent are they? How is this something that, hey, do I really need to worry about concussions? How likely am I to get hurt? Well, that's a good question. Everybody's risk is a little bit different based on a lot of different factors, everything from pre-injury hydration and nutrition, sleep quality, different health factors, gender, sex, age, injury histories, predisposing factors. There are a lot of different things that will increase or decrease the risk of a concussion during sport participation. But anywhere from 1.6 to 3.8 million concussions occur in the United States every single year. And I'm here to tell you that number is only those who either A, knew something was wrong, B, told somebody that something was wrong, or C, sought care in a healthcare facility. Think about that. Up to 3.8 million concussions in the United States every single year, and that's only capturing the people that actually go see a doctor for it. That's not the people that are sitting here going, well, how do I go through this on the internet by myself? Or are trying to mask symptoms for whatever reason. They don't want to deal with it. They don't believe that there's anything wrong. They've been told by somebody that concussions aren't a thing, that you can't get a concussion unless you lose consciousness, that, you have all of these different things that they're trying to listen to. And it's all information that was accurate decades ago that's not accurate now that we have the research to back it up. So that's 3.8 million people a year that are actually asking for help. But the number that should alarm most of us is up to 51% of concussions that occur go unreported or unrecognized for that exact reason that we just talked about. If there are 3.8 million concussions, but we still think 51% go unreported, that's a massive number that we need to be careful with. And it's something that we need to look at when we're trying to educate people, our athletes pre-season, our parents, that, hey, look, concussions are a part of this. Does everybody who plays sports, do they get a concussion? No. If I've had one concussion playing a sport, am I going to get another one? Not necessarily. But when we need to understand the prevalence of concussions, it's not something that just happens every now and again. It's not something that just happens on a whim. It's something that can happen pretty regularly or pretty consistently throughout our sports participation. And it's something that we need to be aware of. Now, most athletes will recover well with proper management without much difficulty, right? They'll be really symptomatic at the beginning, and then over a short course of time, they'll be asymptomatic and back to their normal selves without having any lingering symptoms or lingering effects. Sometimes, okay? When it comes to our athletes, most athletes will bounce back pretty quickly. It's the perks of how healthy they were before they got hurt, what their hydration is, what their nutrition is, things that we'll talk about here in the middle on things that we can do to reduce concussion risk will also set you up for recovery and that recovery process. But most of our athletes will recover pretty easily. I won't say fast, pretty well in the big picture without lingering symptoms with the proper guidance. Now, the clinic is built on the people that don't get better without the proper guidance, right? That don't get better quickly, that need help retraining the brain to move through this. But not everybody needs a service like mine. Not everybody needs to go to a concussion specific location. Do I think everybody should go to a concussion clinic? Absolutely. Can I take my car to get the transmission changed at Walmart? I mean, I'm sure they can work on it. But I would much rather go to an expert transmission service, somebody who specializes in what's wrong with my car. But that being said, not everybody will struggle with concussion recovery. Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's easy, and then sometimes it's not. So going back to sharing with you that the idea that sports are safe, not everybody struggles with this. Not everybody will get a concussion, and not everybody will struggle through their recovery. Not everybody will have effects and symptoms that linger for a long period of time. But there are those people that are out there, and that's why I have the clinic that I have. Sports are safe. I want you to hear that when I say it again. Sports are safe. Injury is a part of life, not just sports. Does the risk go up because we're participating in sports? Yes. But for every football player that comes to my office telling me they got injured during sports, I've got the 6th grader who had a bee land on his arm and he ran into a street light at cross country practice. I've got the little brother of the older sister that we were treating that had a closet door opened up into his face because he was hiding. I've got the athlete that had a dog toy hit him in the back of the head, or my patient that had that got a concussion from doing their hair and they smacked their head on the counter. Things happen in life. Does sports have an increased risk of injury compared to somebody who's just sitting on the couch all day, every day? Yes. But do the risk of sports outweigh the risk of injury? The reward of sport outweigh the risk of injury? Absolutely, tenfold. I want every single person that I talk to be involved in sports throughout middle school, high school, youth, college if you can, because sports teach so many good qualities, and I wouldn't be the person I am without my participation in sports, and I wouldn't be in the career field that I'm in without my participation in sports. But the injury risk is there, and we need to prepare you just in case the injury does happen. So how do we protect your brain from a concussion? The first line of protection is recognition. Knowing what I'm looking for, knowing what the signs and symptoms are of a concussion, whether it's in my child or in me in particular, making sure that I understand what I'm experiencing and that it is actually happening. Just because it's in your head doesn't mean that it's only in your head. Concussions will affect everything from balance to dizziness to our digestive system to our mood regulation. There are a lot of different things that will happen after a concussion that we need to be careful with. So the first step in prevention or recognition and protecting the brain is recognizing what the symptoms are and recognizing what we're dealing with, because we can't treat what we don't recognize. We can't protect you from yourself at times or protect your brain in the case of an injury if we don't know about it. The hardest part when talking with athletic trainers, again, I'm an athletic trainer, the hardest part with concussions on a sideline is there's a lot of subjectivity that goes into it. If somebody doesn't tell me that there's something wrong, I can't just look at you and go, yeah, you probably got a concussion. Now, because I have training in it, I can say, okay, well, these collisions, I need to do an evaluation. There are subtle things that happen, but if I'm one person watching a sideline and there are 200 people running around, I may not see the guy behind the play that fell and hit his head. I might not see the head-to-head collision that happened in the, on a corner kick because the ball went the opposite direction and I was watching the ball go the other way. You have to be able to recognize the symptoms in your child, recognize the symptoms in yourself to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to protect your brain for the long term. When I go out and talk with patients and athletes in particular, kids that need to understand the severity and the risk of concussions, I give them the analogy that you have 2 knees, you have 2 elbows, you have 2 ankles, you have 10 fingers, 10 toes. You can get new ones of all of those, right? Let's say, I tore my ACL, but I wanted to keep playing. It's not recommended, but you can keep doing it. Well, that damage, and if you cause more damage to occur, what happens is you get a new knee down the road. Well, you can get one. If I have a heart and lungs that go out, it's harder to get those, but I can get new ones. As of right now, today, July 15th, 2026, you cannot get a new brain. It's the only thing that's with you from the very beginning till the very end. And depending on what neuroscience research that you look at, it's the only thing that's with you after the end. So we have to protect the brain, and we have to do everything that we can to ensure that the one brain that you're given in life is the one thing that keeps you going and stays working at an effective and efficient manner. Common symptoms, headaches, dizziness, nausea, that's not necessarily the only thing that you're going to notice. And if you've just picked up, I just told you 3 things that as me looking at somebody, I can't feel. I can't see those. So we have to be able to understand what we're experiencing and look at some of the different types of symptoms that are out there. So some of your common symptoms. Not every concussion will present with the exact same symptoms. Not every concussion will present with the same intensity or the same duration of each symptom. But our common concussion symptoms, headache, dizziness, nausea, feeling like we're off balance, being really sensitive to light and noise, feeling mentally confused or slowed down, or difficulty with our memory in general, difficulty concentrating, changes in mood, like those are all pretty common that if you take 100 people off the street and say, hey, what symptoms do you think come with a concussion? Most people will be able to pick out those things, right? Most people will sit here and say, oh, a headache, dizziness, I feel like I'm going to throw up. Like they'll pick up on those. But those common symptoms are where we need to make sure that we're getting that basic understanding. We need to know that if I went head to head with somebody during soccer, or I went to tackle somebody and hit my head on the ground during rugby, or I went up for a pass and somebody's face mask hit the side of my head and I need to know what's going on. Well, if an event has occurred and you're dealing with immediate onset of headaches, dizziness, and nausea, there's a good chance that we're dealing with something that's not just going to go away. It's not something that you can continue to move through. The brain has been injured and we need to go through an evaluation. But these aren't the only symptoms that are prevalent after a concussion. Some of the more uncommon symptoms that people a lot of times will overlook are rapid mood swings. If I'm a parent trying to figure out what's going on with my son, they come over after a game that they just won and they're angry and they're throwing things and they're mad or upset. If they're normally a really grumpy person after a game and all of a sudden they're laughing uncontrollably and they're having a good time, or you've got a kid that's never cried after a game at all and they just lost a 1-0 game and they're crying for the first time, there needs to be that red flag that goes up as a parent. Something is off, something is different, and we need to figure out and keep an eye on what's different after that injury or after that game that we may not be privileged to going forward. Anxiety is a big one. We got a question here. Can an airbag hit to the head cause the same presentation? The easy answer is absolutely. At the very beginning of the presentation we talked about with concussions, there doesn't have to be a direct hit to the head. Concussions are caused by direct hits to the head, or a rapid direct hit to the head or neck or body, or rapid movement of the head, neck, or body. If you think about what happens in a car accident, the first thing that everybody talks about is whiplash, right? Whiplash is a mechanism of injury. It's not a diagnosis. When we look at mechanism of injury, whiplash is the movement. It's a whip-lash movement. Well, if I go through that same motion, I'm driving my car and I get hit and I'm coming forward, there's a rapid movement that occurs to the brain inside the skull. The airbag hits me and I'm forced backwards. That causes that shearing force to occur inside the brain. It causes that shearing force to disrupt neurons. It can present with high blood pressure and heart rate spikes as a symptom. One of those uncommon symptoms that we can really get into, and that's why some people don't recover as fast, is there's a difficult disruption of the autonomic system. There's an increase in heart rate and blood pressure that doesn't follow the increase of aerobic demand. Most females will have an elevated heart rate after a brain injury. Well, the brain can't control the heart rate as easily, so it'll try to fluctuate blood pressure. We get really kind of increases in headaches and dizziness based on body movement. We can do fine at rest, but all of a sudden we try to go out and work out, and now all of a sudden we get really dizzy and nauseous because the increase in heart rate and blood pressure don't line up to the increase in aerobic demand. So some of the less common symptoms that we deal with, that anxiety and irritability, are a big one. And I'll venture to say it's not necessarily just that they're prevalent. People who have anxiety, they get concussions, the first thing that they'll tell you is their anxiety is a whole lot worse. I will talk with patients about it. My anxiety feels like it's off the charts. My normal triggers of, meeting new people, being around new games, big tests, being in new relationships, going somewhere where I've never been before. Those are all pretty normal triggers for anxiety. After a brain injury, laying down and going to bed, going from a busy environment to a calm environment, going into a busy environment, sitting down at the dinner table and getting a chance to finally relax will trigger some anxiety symptoms that come up. When I start educating on my patients, the very first appointment, we spend an hour to an hour and a half just talking about the injury, about what's going on. You can see the light bulb go off on almost every single person that I work with, that when you sit down to eat dinner with your family, that's why your heart races. That's why your blood pressure goes up. I talk about going to bed a lot. When I lay down to go to bed at night, I can't figure out what's going on. I toss, I turn, I can't get comfortable. I get hot and sweaty and they get cold and clammy. And it's almost like I've got a fever. For some people, it's a couple seconds. For some people, it's a couple hours. But that change in hormone structure while the brain's trying to shut down is something that is an uncommon symptom that people will notice. The brain fog is the big one that most people will overlook who are trying to figure out what happened. It's the, I don't feel bad, I don't feel good, I don't feel sharp, I just kind of feel flat. I feel like I'm along for the ride, or I'm going through the motions. I've got a patient that a couple of years ago described it as, I feel like I'm just watching myself on a TV. I feel like I have no control over what's happening, but I can react when it starts to happen. So that brain fog, that irritability, that personality change, those are all pretty common. And generally those are tied a lot to sleep changes. And it's not just sleeping more than normal. It can be a pretty telltale sign when I've got somebody who, after the football game on Friday nights, they go out to Pizza Hut with their buddies, but tonight, for whatever reason, he just wants to lay down and go to bed. They just won the volleyball match and it's a big game and they want to go celebrate. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to go home and rest. I'm tired. I've got school to get up to. All I want to do is sleep. And then there are times where all I want to do is sleep and I can't sleep. And it's a challenge with identifying those uncommon symptoms, because if I'm working with a teenager and they tell me all I want to do is go take a nap, that's what teenagers do sometimes. So it's something that we need to keep an eye on. Just because an athlete has one of these symptoms after a game doesn't necessarily mean that a concussion's occurred. It's something that we need to focus on, and it's something that we need to keep an eye on during our concussion recovery. And while we're trying to monitor for somebody, just because one of these symptoms happens doesn't mean that they're all of a sudden out. But it's something that we need to keep an eye on to make sure that we're following or progressing or seeing any changes that might occur during the early stages of the brain injury. Some other uncommon ones: neck pain and neck stiffness. And some people that are like, well, I feel like in car accidents, not every sport related concussion has neck pain or neck tension. A lot of people will talk about like my neck doesn't hurt, but it's stiff. I feel tight, like my shoulders, I can't relax. And that's because the brain's trying to protect its movement, it's trying to control the movement of the brain. But that neck pain, that neck stiffness, that motion sensitivity, all of those go in. When I sit down and try to explain something to patients, or I'm going through and I'm presenting to a football program or a basketball program on, hey, look, these are some uncommon things. My first thing that I talk about with athletes in that puberty age is rapid changes to appetite. Man, my son, he just eats everything. And all of a sudden he came home and he didn't eat. He didn't want to eat after the game. And that's not like him. He always wants something. He's always begging me for food. That's something to keep an eye on to ensure that we're monitoring that in case a brain injury has occurred. Again, when we're trying to prepare you for the season, we're trying to get you to notice the small, subtle changes. As a parent, I will notice changes in my kid like right away. And that's something that I will check in on because that's what I'm supposed to do as a parent. I will tell you the strongest component of the prevention or the protection side of brain injuries is mama bear. There is something off with my child. There is something different with my child. I don't know what it is, but there is a gut feeling there's just something that is wrong. 9 times out of 10, if you have a mom or a dad that's like, hey, something's off with my kid, until you can prove otherwise, there is something off with that kid. And we need to figure out what it is. It's not always a brain injury. Sometimes life happens, right? Sometimes there's a relationship or a friendship that's changed. Sometimes they got a bad grade on a test. Sometimes we're doing stuff we shouldn't be doing. But when a parent looks at me and says, hey, there's something off, until you can prove that that kid is perfectly healthy, it is mama and papa bear's word for it 10 times out of 10. And we have to figure out what's off. Because again, in my world, I don't know people healthy, right? When I'm meeting somebody for the first time, I have no idea their personality. I have no idea their energy or their effort levels. I have no idea their interactions. I know nothing other than they're seeing me, so something is wrong. Now, my favorite part about my job is as they start to get better, you start to see personality come back. That's my favorite part of what I do, is to be able to see the personality come back. And when we're all said and done, know who that person is, not just who their brain injury is. And that's powerful. I love that. But when we're looking at trying to identify common versus uncommon symptoms, every brain injury is unique. No individual is going to have the exact same symptoms. So be careful if you've had a concussion and you're trying to pass that information on to your kid. Be careful going, well, my concussion, I was dizzy and I felt like I was going to throw up every day. They may not have either of those symptoms, but that doesn't mean that an injury hasn't occurred. So you need to be careful when we're trying to relay our experience, because not every brain injury is the same. Not every symptoms are going to be the same. So what can we do to actually reduce the risk for concussions? I absolutely hate injury prevention as a marketing tool. Okay. In my licensure, one of my core principles of my licensure is injury prevention. I think that is the weirdest phrasing for anything, because no matter what we do, we cannot 100% prevent injury. I'm not in an injury prevention situation. I cannot control what happens to you as you're walking down the stairs. I can't control you walking across the street and another car hitting you. I can't control you playing football and stepping on an uneven surface and rolling your ankle. I can't control you walking down the court and the volleyball net stanchion hitting you on the back of the head. I can't control those things, and there's nothing that you can do to prevent that. So when I start talking about what we do with concussions, concussion risk reduction, I would love to at some point wake up and there is something that I can have you wear or something that I can give you that 100% puts me out of a job. Anybody that's new or trying to follow along and you realize that, man, that guy's weird, like go back and listen to some of my stuff. I say it all the time. My whole goal is to hope at some point in my life, I am out of a job because concussions aren't a problem anymore. That there's nothing that you need or nothing that we need to do to essentially help you, that I can take this or I can wear this and my brain is 100% safe. If I wake up tomorrow and that's the case, I will find a new job happily. But right now, that's not the case. So we talk about how we can prevent concussions. No. Anything labeled as concussion prevention, whether it's an exercise, a protocol, a device, anything that's out there labeled as concussion prevention is trying to sell you something at a much higher market value because they are marketing to you on fear and instinct, right? They're trying to give you something that we know you can get away with because you want to do everything you can to protect your athlete's brain. Anything labeled as concussion prevention is lying to you. Again, we can reduce the risk, but we can't prevent the movement inside the brain. For all the technology that we have, we cannot prevent the shearing force that occurs inside the brain. So, there is no vitamins, no supplements, no helmet, no mouth guard, no wearables, no exercise, nothing that can 100% prevent concussions. There are several things that we can do to help reduce the risk, and that's what we're going to talk about. But there is nothing out there that can prevent concussions. So what can we do to reduce the risk? Helmets are being designed and constantly being changed and improved to help with protection. What are we protecting from? Skull fractures, not concussions. I give you the analogy of an egg. Most people that have gone through the middle school, high school realm, they've either done this experiment in science class or have heard of it. If I walk up to the top of the stadium and drop an egg, I want you to build me something to protect the egg inside. Cool. Well, you can build something around the egg, but 9 times out of 10, the egg breaks. Because we can't keep the inside of the brain protected. I'll take that analogy one step further. Even if the shell doesn't break, the egg yolk gets broken if we move it fast enough and hard enough. We used to give the analogy that the skull is a bowl of jello, that if I wrapped a padding around the outside of the skull or the bowl, that I can smack the skull or smack the helmet and we reduce the amount of force that goes through the brain. Great, we reduce it, but we can't prevent it from happening. Help driving for impact. So would a helmet help reduce the injury risk if you're driving? Like if I wore a helmet to drive? No. It's not going to help the brain injury aspect of things. Can it reduce the risk of skull fractures? Absolutely, it could. But you're going to have that risk versus reward. You lose peripheral vision. It's not safe to wear a helmet while driving. But the whole argument of wearing a helmet while biking, is it going to prevent the brain injury? No. Is it going to help you reduce the risk of skull fractures and make it so the injury that does happen is less intense or less severe? Potentially. But it's not going to keep the egg yolk from moving inside the shell. It's not going to keep the shearing forces from happening inside the brain. Helmets do not prevent concussions. The NFL is funding a ton of different money into research studies. The helmets are getting better at diffusing our forces around the skull. But as of right now, with the right technology that we have available to us, you cannot prevent concussions with a helmet. The same goes with a mouth guard. There are a lot of products, and throughout history, research has gone back and forth on whether it can prevent things or not with helmets and mouth guards alike. Now, if I'm talking to you about, hey, my son goes out and plays football, yeah, I'm going to put him in the best rated helmet that I can find, and he's going to wear a mouth guard because we're trying to reduce risk. But is it going to prevent concussions? No, neither one of them are. Helmets are good with skull fractures. Mouth guards are good with dental fractures. Other equipment that's out there, I won't name products, but if you have any questions about a specific product, because there are a bunch of them. Concussions are a hotbed topic, and we're trying to do as much as we can to protect the brains. A lot of the research that's going on in the NFL is because the NFL said they didn't have a concussion problem or didn't have a chronic brain injury problem. Well, we're starting to see more and more what's coming out with CTE and everything that's going on with the NFL, the players that are retiring. The risk is there. So we're getting a lot of the research because they settled a lawsuit that there is a problem and they need to focus on it and they need to help it. So all of the other products that are out there, if they're telling you that they're preventing concussions or significantly reducing the risk of concussions, you need to look at who's funding the research. if it can be verified multiple times through independent research, the likelihood that they're claiming is accurate goes up. Now, are there a bunch of products that are out there that can reduce the risk? Yeah, there are great products that are out there that can reduce the risk of concussions. But if you're 100% putting all of your weight into this is going to protect my brain for sure, there's nothing that you can do that will 100% prevent concussions. Equipment is important. Making sure that it's updated, it's conditioned, it fits properly is important. But equipment alone is not going to 100% prevent concussions, and it's not enough to protect your brain. So what can we do to protect the brain as we're coming into the next sports season? The only thing that has withstood all research ebbs and flows in the concussion space is functional neck strength. We used to put a lot of weight into helmets. We used to put a lot of weight into mouthguards. We used to put a lot of weight into backing up the blood flow and padding the helmets. Like, we put a lot of weight into those things early. But the only thing that keeps coming back is reducing the risk of concussions is functional neck strength. And when I say functional, it's not just your ability to keep your head up. It's your strengthening and moving in different patterns and moving in different positions. If you DM me the word neck, I will send you a functional neck strengthening routine that I build with football players across my area. Stronger neck muscles help control head movements. It helps control the rapid movements. It helps control rotational forces, and it helps control if an impact happens. So we need to focus and put our priority into building a functional neck strengthening routine. We need to make sure that we're following the proper techniques and rules of the sport that we're playing. All of the changes that you're seeing in the NFL to the kickoff and the impacts that are happening, the hit box on quarterbacks and receivers, all of those changes are to reduce injury risk for the athletes. Following the proper guidelines and techniques and rules of your sport reduces the risk of concussions for a lot of them, because we need to make sure that we're using proper tackling techniques. We need to make sure that we're using proper guidelines and equipment. Absolutely. The strengthening. So the question was, does the strengthening of the neck help with the vestibular and proprioceptive systems after a concussion or somebody who's dealing with cervical, persisting post-concussion symptoms? The answer is absolutely 1,000,000%. The missing piece for a lot of people, hey PR, the missing piece for a lot of people in their concussion recovery world is that they're not actually taking into consideration that functional neck strength aspect of things. So the outside of functional neck strength, outside of proper technique and rules, proper sleep and proper hydration are the two free foundational blocks that every single person needs to look at. Every single person needs to prioritize during their preseason, and everybody in general for brain health and body health needs to prioritize long-term. Proper sleep. We want consistent, high-quality sleep. We want a high quality and a high quantity sleep at the end of the day. But the goal is I'm trying to be consistent in my sleep routines. I am one to tell you that I do not sleep very well consistently. I'm working on it, trying to get better. It's part of the problem. I tell patients all the time that, hey, sleep all the time and do these things. I get it. Sleep can be really challenging at times. But as an athlete preparing for your season, trying to reduce the risk of all musculoskeletal injuries, all concussions, trying to reduce that risk of injury, we need to prioritize proper sleep, proper hydration, and proper nutrition. If you guys have questions on what proper sleep and proper nutrition or hydration looks like for your age group, shoot me a DM. I will gladly answer that question for you, because it's going to vary for everybody depending on age group, depending on a bunch of various factors on what their sport is, what their injury history looks like. Don't be afraid to make that decision to prioritize yourself during sports participation. I need to go home. I need to protect my sleep. I need to protect my hydration levels. I need to protect myself at the end of the day. So, digging in a little bit more in depth into nutrition and brain health. I am not a dietitian. I won't pretend to be. I will tell you that when I sit down and have conversations with patients about individual dietary changes or individual recommendations to food, I have to do a lot of research and preparation right away. Again, I'm not a dietitian, but when I look at concussions, we have to use the proper amount of food, the proper amount of fuel to help the brain. Food is fuel for the brain. So when we're trying to prepare yourselves for that competition season, for your upcoming fall sports season, we need to make sure that we're getting the right food into our system. Protein will help aid in tissue repair, not just brain injuries, but muscle tissue repair. That's why if you've ever gone through weightlifting for your sport, we talk about getting a protein shake right after your workout. Well, it's because it helps with repairing of the tissues that we just broke down during our workout. After a brain injury, protein can help repair those neural connections. It can help repair the damaged muscle tissue in the neck that we have after the injury. It's good for aiding in our overall tissue repair. Carbohydrates are fuel for the brain. So with carbs, we need to make sure that we're actually getting them in. Now, again, brain injuries are cause an inflammatory response. So we want to focus on getting inflammatory foods into our system, but we need carbs. Carbs are not the bad guy because carbs are fuel for the body, fuel for your performance, fuel for your brain. If we're injured, we might make some recommendations and some changes. But as I'm going through and preparing for you preseason, we need to make sure that we're getting the proper amount of carbohydrates into our system. Omega-3s can be something that is a wild card and can be the key to concussion recovery. Omega-3s can help reduce inflammation and improve brain health before the injury even happens. Again, just talked about brain injuries cause an inflammatory response. Everything that I can do to control that inflammatory response will help aid in our concussion recovery. When the brain is injured, we become very deficient in vitamins A, B12, C, D, omega-3s, magnesium L-threonate, and creatine. The brain injury itself causes a neurometabolic cascade. That neurometabolic cascade is just changes to hormone production, vitamins, and supplement usage inside the body. If we can have high levels of vitamins A, B12, C, D, omega-3s, magnesium, and creatine in our system at the time that we get hurt, we can actually reduce that neurometabolic cascade intensity and duration. We can actually reduce the amount of damage that's happening because we have those vitamins in our system at a high level. Anybody that's gearing up for their competition season, at minimum, should be taking a multivitamin every single day. At minimum. I would venture to say that if you're not taking vitamins A, B12, C, D, omega-3s, magnesium, and creatine on a regular basis during your sport participation, you're setting yourself up for an injury, not just brain injury. You're setting yourself up for an injury in the big picture. We need to make sure that we're prioritizing those vitamins and supplements consistently on a daily basis. Progress over perfection. If I forget to take my vitamin on Wednesday, does that mean that I'm going to get injured on Thursday or I'm going to get injured Wednesday night? No. We want you to take it consistently, but if you miss a day, that's fine. There are a ton of new research. So if we don't compete, are those vitamins good for us in the long term? That was a question that was just asked on TikTok. Absolutely. Brain health, that's what we should be doing on a regular basis to help keep those into our system. The best way to keep those vitamins in our system is through proper nutrition, not necessarily vitamin supplementation. But depending on our nutrition, I'll tell you, my nutrition's not the best. I supplement with a multivitamin at minimum every single day because that's in my system and that's helping me throughout body processing. It's helping my immune system. It's helping energy production. It's helping reduce illness risk and injury risk. A great balanced diet should have a lot of those in our system, but here in the Midwest, we don't get as many of the nutrients that we should naturally, and we don't get as much direct sunlight exposure as we would like because of where we're located. There's a lot of new research that's coming out on creatine. The research is very exciting. Creatine right now in the brain injury space is being heralded as one of those like magic supplements like, man, we should probably all be taking this every day no matter what, because we're starting to see those benefits. Well, just like any research, you're starting to see the benefits, but we're not able to prove them every single time, right? A lot of the research that's been done originally was on, mice and rat studies in the brain, and now we need to start looking at what they do to humans. But my generation growing up, creatine's bad for all of us. It's going to hurt our kidneys. It's going to hurt our liver. It's going to dehydrate us. Your muscles are going to break down when you stop taking it. Just like anything else in life, we're like, hey, man, we should probably research what we're saying. And we have started to realize that creatine is actually really, really good for brain health. There is a high level dose of creatine that has right now that they're starting to show as neurologic properties and helping with regeneration of neurons, or what we call neurogenesis. It's being studied in dementia and Alzheimer patients to help with brain health overall. The goal is a 10 gram to 20 gram dose of creatine a day has neural properties and neuro benefits. The muscle growth dose of creatine a day is 3 to 5 grams. That's a lot different. It's a lot more. If I have somebody who's navigating through brain injury recovery, we will talk about those higher doses, those 10 to 20 gram doses of creatine a day. If I'm trying to set an athlete up for the best possible position moving forward, I would want them to stay on 5 grams of creatine every day during their season and during their sport participation. Now, in the big picture, creatine is one of those things that they're starting to look at. Should everybody be taking creatine? And as the research continues to come out, it's looking more and more yes. But if you're never taken creatine before, make sure that you consult with somebody on your healthcare team to talk about whether creatine is safe for your situation or not. The same thing goes with everything else. I'm a random guy on TikTok telling you, hey, vitamins are good for you. If you're allergic to vitamin A, don't take vitamin A. Okay, so making sure that if you're starting a new vitamin or supplement, you're following up with somebody from your healthcare team that knows your situation. What brand of creatine is an easy answer. It doesn't matter, but what you're looking for is something that is strict creatine monohydrate with nothing else in it. We don't want a flavor. We don't want chemical additives. We want something that your brand says creatine monohydrate, and then if it has anything else in it, it's vanilla extract, natural plant flavors. Okay. I will always recommend a compressed pill over a powder because as we get into those neuro doses of creatine, 20 grams of creatine in a glass of water tastes like you're drinking chalk. 20 grams of creatine in a chocolate milk is like chewing a chocolate piece of chalk. Compressed pills, it's easier. When you're looking at vitamins and supplements, researching for a natural brand will be better for you in the long run. Buying something that they sell at Walmart, at CVS, at Whole Foods is better for you if they, than finding something randomly on the internet. The likelihood of them having additive fillers in them if they're a natural supplement like Nature Bounty, Sam's Club, Kirkland's, those natural brands or the big vitamin brands generally tend to have a higher quality in them, but always read the label because the supplement market is unregulated. I only have to have a certain value of what I'm putting into it to get it back out. Okay. So the last kind of touch that I want to, just glance over briefly is baseline testing. If you're an athlete, you've ever had an athlete, you've ever worked with an athlete, when we start looking at baseline testing, it is probably something that you have heard your athlete absolutely talk about hating. Baseline testing is not necessarily the most fun thing to do, especially because most of the time they're giving it to you in the summertime. They're sitting you down at 6 o'clock in the morning on the first day of football practice saying, cool, I want you to take this 45-minute test. It's not fun for people. But baseline testing can be invaluable to somebody in my shoes, somebody who's trying to help you navigate through your concussion recovery, somebody who's trying to put a plan together for you, or somebody who is trying to make that decision on whether or not you're healthy enough to get back to sports. Because baseline testing is a pre-injury snapshot on who you are before the injury occurs. At the beginning of this talk, I mentioned I have no idea who somebody is healthy. I don't. They come to me injured, and I have to figure out, are they just not interested because I'm boring, which that happens, or are they not interested because they can't comprehend? Are they not laughing at jokes because I'm not funny? Again, happens. But are they just struggling with understanding the joke and timing? Do they not pick up on it? I don't know who you are. If I have a baseline test, I have an understanding of who you were before you got hurt. Now, personality-wise, do I know? Not necessarily, because that's not what brain injury baseline testing does. But it gives us a snapshot on what you look like before you got injured. So the common components of a good, thorough baseline test include our symptoms at the time of test. Not everybody is all zeros. One of the questions on the concussion questionnaire that happens is, are you tired? Well, if I'm testing somebody at 4 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning on the first day of football, they might be more tired than normal. It's pretty normal. So we get a snapshot on what symptoms are rating on a 0 to 10 or a 0 to 6 scale at the time of the test. We get a good coordination, or we get a good look at what your balance looks like, what your reaction time looks like, what your memory does, what your balance and vestibular systems look like, what your vision and tracking looks like, how quickly you can process information. All of those things done as a pre-injury level help us on the back end trying to make the decision on whether or not you're healthy enough to go back to sports, whether or not the treatment plans that we're using are actually working. Because I have a 14-year-old that's just shy and doesn't open up. I have that baseline data, that baseline information that I can compare to figure out whether or not they're making progress during their concussion recovery. Baseline testing is one tool in the toolbox, and it should never be used in isolation to rule in or rule out a concussion. They are not the end-all be-all. And I will tell you, with the advances in technology, there are some absolutely incredible, thorough, easy to administer, easy to understand, affordable tests that are out there that are absolutely great. I work with a brand that I would recommend to anybody, but they are fantastic. And in my opinion, you can't go wrong with any of them on the market right now because of what they're trying to do. They're trying to give us pre-injury snapshots on functionality, on cognition, on memory, on all of the things that get disrupted after a concussion. But they are one tool in the toolbox. They are not what everybody should be doing. They are one tool in your toolbox. So how do I use a baseline test other than just snapshot looking at it and comparing it to somebody else? It gives objective data. I mentioned earlier that if I look at 100 people on a sideline, I can't tell who's concussed, and I work with concussions all day. Now, if I've got the kid wearing sunglasses at 9 o'clock at night and the sun's down, yeah, there's a pretty good chance that there's some visual disruption, but not necessarily. Sometimes the sun never sets on the cool, and we just like to wear sunglasses. You never know. So when I start looking at diagnosing concussions, when I start looking at trying to help navigate through your concussion recovery, trying to help with those return to play decisions, the more objective data we have, the better we can make those decisions, the more informed that we are. It helps compare where you are currently to what happened before the injury. And it can also help us that if you take a test after the injury and then down the road every couple days, every 2 weeks, every month, if you take that test continually, we can see the progress on where we've come from versus where we've been. You know, one of the hardest parts of brain injury recovery is not seeing progress. If I've got somebody who's stuck in progress, I'll give them the baseline test, or I'll give them a cognitive test and say, hey, look, 2 weeks ago you failed. Today you did much better. Even though it may not feel like it, you are making those improvements. It helps make a more guided decision making. It helps us take some of the guesswork out of concussion recovery in the big picture. It helps give us the information that we need to make safer decisions moving forward. The Midwest Concussion Clinic Baseline Bundle, I use a company called Sway Medical that I can send you a code to your phone that you can complete the test in 20 to 30 minutes using a smartphone in an environment that you feel safe and comfortable. I get those results. I can review them. If there's something that we don't like, or there's something that you tell me you're a Division I caliber athlete and your balance is X, Y, and Z, that I can sit here and say, hey, look, we're going to take this part of it again. We're going to take this part a second time or a third time. We're going to make sure that you have an accurate representation of who you are and what your athleticism level looks like. That baseline bundle, I paired that with a vestibulo-ocular motor screen that looks at eye movements and body movement and head movement to give us a snapshot on what you look like functionally as a person before you get injured. If you're interested in scheduling the baseline bundle, you can find it on the website, mwconcussion.com. It runs you through how to schedule, and it's done 100% virtual. I do it year round. So if you've got somebody who's not getting into this, who doesn't have a sport until the springtime, you're not wasting your time or hurting yourself if you put it off and you come in and see me later. But every athlete, in my opinion, should have a baseline test because it gives us the objective information, whether you're seeing me or not. It gives the treating provider and people that are helping you navigate through your concussion recovery, it gives them objective data that we can compare to help take some of the guesswork out of our recovery. So today's webinar, a little bit longer than I anticipated, but that's the best part about interaction and answering questions. We get a chance to have those conversations. If you're interested, I have a guide that I've called the Preseason Guide to Concussion Recovery. It provides everything that we talked about, from common symptoms, uncommon symptoms, what we should do in the first 24 to 48 hours, what hydration should look like, what nutrition should look like, and what we need to do to ensure that we're setting our athlete or our child up for the best possible scenario moving into your fall season. All you need to do is shoot me a DM with your email and I will send you this guide. And again, If you're interested in the baseline bundle, I do sell the Midwest Concussion Clinic baseline bundle on my website. It comes with that sway medical evaluation. It comes with the vestibulo-ocular motor evaluation. It comes with a couple different things in identifying symptoms and treating the first couple days. It's a little bit more in-depth than the free guide that I offer. If you're somebody who's interested, schedule that on my website. The appointment itself takes about a half hour. That will bounce through it, get done pretty quickly, pretty easily, and you'll have that information with you. You'll own the information. I store it because if you come back to me, I want to have it. But if you go see somebody else or you treat somebody else or you're in foreign countries, if you're in Canada, you're in Greenland, you're over in the UK, you're in Ecuador, and you have these testings available to you, I can send you that code to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. You can take the test and we can interpret the data and give you some feedback on what we're looking at. If you're somebody who, hey, I'm outside of my sport participation, but I don't know what brain function looks like. I've been doing this with a lot of my older patients that I work with. If they've got a history of family depression or family dementia and Alzheimer's, we have a core baseline that we can look at and say, hey, look, this is what cognitive looked like on July 15th, 2026. And then if you have issues down the road, well, we at least have a baseline data, or we at least have some objective value that we can put on place and say, hey, look, this is where I was at before things started to change. Because in the big picture of neurohealth, concussions, dementia, Alzheimer, ALS, MS, differences and changes to neural function, the more information we have when things are healthy and things are going well, the easier it becomes to guide our treatment plans moving forward. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, please share it with anybody. You can follow us on all our social media accounts at mwconcussion.com. Every third Wednesday of the month at noon Eastern time, I put together the Midwest Concussion Clinic monthly lunch and learn. Well, I'll take a topic that I'm seeing in clinic, a topic that I've had people ask about, or something that I'm really passionate with, put it into a webinar, put it out, keep it up for free. It's always free to join. You never have to register for anything. But again, every third Wednesday at noon p.m., 12 p.m. Eastern time on TikTok and YouTube Live. Then the replays are all hosted. I appreciate anybody for stopping by. Again, if you ever have any questions or you want to learn more, you can follow me. You can check out the website, mwconcussion.com. You can DM me, you can email me, ask any questions that you have. My goal is to help people. And if I can't treat you, if I'm not treating you, in particular, but I can help guide you in the right direction and help you take your recovery back in your own hands, I will do that 10 times out of 10. I'm put on this planet to help. My job is to help people, and I help people by providing concussion information that's accurate and easy to understand. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care, and if you need anything, you know where to find me.